Day six. We're going to get in the weeds today. So far, we've really been looking at curated tables on Dune and Flipside. And, I wanted to take things a step further as I was learning how to analyze soul data. And what this step is basically you can take any transaction, any program, and break it down from its raw data, decode it, and understand what's going on. So to dive into this, what I recommend obviously is if you're using Dune, if you're using Flipside, use their curated tables, use their decoded tables. But sometimes you run into a scenario where you don't have the data available to be able to decode it. It's not available in the curated spells, and you got to go get the data from the raw data yourself. And in that scenario, that's where you're going to use these skills here. And I think it's important to really, really learn these skills. If you're coming from EVM, it's very similar. Sometimes you gotta decode that raw call data. You gotta decode that raw event data, and it's just a powerful tool for you to fully understand what's going on in these transactions and to be able to parse it out and understand it. All right, so we're gonna stick with pump.fun. Last day on pump.fun. So I was working on kind of pulling out all the data for swaps when Andrew from the Dune team reached out to me. He said, "Hey, uh, I'm a Giga Chad. I went ahead and created a spell for this." So he sent that to me, and what I'm gonna do really is I'm gonna take the meat of this spell, and I'm gonna show you how he's pulling that raw data, decoding it, and basically, yeah, adding it to Dex trades. All right, let's get into the weeds here. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull one single example. I'm going to pull one swap example. What that one is here is what do we have? We have a sell. Okay, so on pump.fun, there's the sell. What happens? There's this outer instruction, and then it calls these inner instructions here. And this it's a CPI, but it's calling itself here. So pump.fun is calling invoking pump.fun again here, and this is the instruction data, the raw instruction data that this is all the information we need. All this base 58 right here. This is all we need to pull out, and you can see it's decoded down here. All this data. All right, so let's do that. So data on Solana is base 58. This is what we see when we're working with it on Dune. On this table I'm going to show you specifically. It's already converted to hex data. So you can see I just click this, and solscan here also converts it for us as well. So this is the raw data we're going to be working with. Jumping over to Dune. So the table I'm using is this instruction call. It is a raw table, so be very careful using it. It will pull a lot of data if you're not filtering correctly. So yeah, here we're filtering by one specific transaction ID, and then we're also putting in the block slot just to kind of speed up that query time. And let's dive into it. So what we get from there is this data field, and I think I put it down in the results here, but yeah, all we're going to be working with is this data field. Look at all this big line up till there. That matches this data here in hex format. So we're just going to be pulling out all the data sets we need from there. And let's get into it. So the raw data field, I said it's base 58 originally. It's already converted into hex data, so we work from there. And the first two hex digits, or two hex digits, equal 1 byte. So what you see a lot of times what I'm pulling here is I'm saying, hey, give me 16 bytes in the substring. And hey, but there's actually 32 characters. So that's why you're seeing that. 16 bytes is ultimately 32 hex characters here. So yeah, really what we're going to do is going to pull that data. We're going to say, hey, the first substring 1 through 16. So if we grab the first 16 here, this is going to be our sort of like event name. It's swap event ultimately, and it looks like this. All right, and then next we want the token mint address. And this is where it's nice to have a block explorer. It's really good to know, okay, after these first 16 that identify sort of what this is, what are these next chunks of data? that I need to grab to pull out the information that I want. And if we look at a block explorer here, and we go to, all right, down here. So we see that the next is sort of that the mint address. The type is a public key. That's an address ultimately, and the data is here, and that's what we're trying to extract. We're trying to extract that mint public key, that mint address here, and we'll see that as we go down the line. The next one is the sol amount. The type is unsigned integer 64, and here's the data we're going to try and pull out. So I'll start with this one, and then I'll show you guys how to pull the next one, and then really it's just using those building blocks to grab the next after that. All right, so we want to grab the token mint address. So what do we do here? So we've already grabbed 1 through 16 to pull that swap event identifier. So next, what we want to do is pull the next 32. So what we're doing here is, hey, we've already pulled 1 through 16. So let's start at 17. We've done 1 through 16. Now let's grab 17, and we want to grab 32 bytes after that. So a public key and an address is 32 bytes long. It's something good to memorize, 64 characters in hex. So when you see type, public key, or address, you know that you need to grab 32 bytes of data. So that's what we're going to do here, and this will give us our token mint address. And then, all right, let's keep moving down that data pipeline here. So if we grab that 32, it's this 64 characters. All right, now we've made it to here, and we want to pull out the next set of data, and that's that sol amount. We saw it here. Okay, the next set of data is the sol amount. Type is unsigned integer 64. So that's the information we need to take. We need to say, okay, how many bytes do I need to grab? And in this case, I need to grab 8. And if this is getting a little confusing right here, really what Andrew's doing here is he's keeping this sort of uh, this code in like a nice readable format. Like we could have just wrote one number here, but what he's showing you is like, hey, we grabbed 1 through 16 here, so I'm gonna do 1 and 16. And on the next one, we grab 32. So we add 32, and we're going to keep doing that as we move along that data, that set of data. So here we want to grab the next 8. So an unsigned integer, we only want to grab 8 bytes. So it's kind of diving a little bit too much into the details here, but unsigned integer 64 means 64 bytes, and 8 bytes equals 64 bits. Hopefully I said that right. But ultimately, so we only need 8 bytes. So here, if we grab the next 8, that'll give us the sol amount, and that'll give us this right here. Now, right now, this is in hexadecimal format. We need to convert it to unsigned integer 256, or an integer ultimately. So you got to do this byte array reverse, and then byte array to UN 256. Yeah, honestly, save this, recognize when you need to go from one type to another, and use these functions here. These are really neat functions that Dune has built that allows you to really pull this raw data here. All right, and yeah, I'm honestly gonna end it there, but you keep doing that. We're gonna look at the next one. We say, okay, token amount, unsigned integer 64. So we're gonna keep moving down. We know it's unsigned integer 64, so we need 8 more bytes. This next one's actually a Boolean. Let me make sure that's right. Yeah, is by Boolean. It's a 1 or a 0. It's true or false. So in that case, we only need to grab 1 byte there. User, that's a public key, so that's 32 bytes. Timestamp, sol reserves, token reserves. Those are all integers, so grab 888. And as you can see, the substring, we're starting later as we're moving down that data set. All right, guys. Yeah, and then ultimately running that, we're able to see that we got the swap event ID, we got the token mint address, we got the sol amount, we got the token amount. Is it a buy? Is it 0? So no. Got the user ID, we got trade timestamp and Unix, sol reserves, token reserves. Yeah, all right, you get the gist. So we've pulled out all of this data right here, and it initially looked like this. I mean, this is a nice readable matrix, but ultimately this is that raw hex data that we've been working with. Same here, this raw hex data here. Um, okay, guys, I know that was pretty quick. This is definitely sort of I would call sort of an advanced step as you're learning Solana data, as you're learning to work with any raw data, especially on Dune. So I will link where I learned this from Andrew in his one of his Substacks. So highly recommend reading through that, maybe taking a look at this with my notes, looking at some of his queries, and hopefully after you bang your head enough times, it'll start to make sense. It will take you a little while to fully understand all this, so don't get discouraged if you don't get it right away. All right, guys, I'll see you next time.